Hey everyone, Chris Murray of Elevation Wheel Company here. I wanted to do a video on inventory levels in the bike industry and what to expect over the next 6 months, year, 2+ years out. There's a lot of uncertainty right now in the industry. Can we get parts? When will we get parts? What's it going to look like after last year's bike boom? So I sat down with a couple friends of mine from couple different manufacturers that are pretty well connected to the back end of the bike industry, and they gave me some really good tips that hopefully help you guys out. I'd also like to ask you guys, if you've got anything that could be helpful for the people watching this, leave them in the comments down below. Let us know what you're doing, what's working for you, what you've heard from your reps. Um, Hopefully we can help somebody out. Um, but what's what I'm planning on, where my head is at through all of this, is 2021 service is going to be king. I've kind of been saying that since I've started this channel, but I think this year more than ever, I think this year will benefit mechanics that are good at making things work rather than just replacing things that could be repaired, but a lot of people don't want to take the extra effort to do it. Especially on the lower end, parts are really, really difficult to come by. I've heard a few of my reps that wanted to be mentioned off camera say 400 to 600 days on some of the lower level parts and componentry. So expect a lot of supply issues, especially on the lower level stuff. I'm also stocking up my inventory personally. I've probably got 5 to 6 times as much inventory going into this year than I did last year. Last year, I relied pretty heavily on the ability to order products when I needed them, have them shipped soon. I don't think that will work very well this year. You may get lucky, but I think if you're relying on being able to get the part, order the part when the customer requests it, I think you're going to be having a hard time. So if you can swing the cost, I think this is a really good year to throw a little bit more inventory early on so you've got it when the season gets busy. That's what I did. I'm hoping it pays off. Um, but yeah, so hopefully you guys will find this helpful. We'll get to the questions with Jeff Zell from Panaracer and Adam Miller from Revel Bikes and Y Cycles. They are both really good at what they do, really well connected to the industry, so they've got a much deeper understanding than just their own specific brand because they talk with all of the big players in the game. So they've got some great advice. I learned a lot from them, some really interesting bits on some of the breakdowns in the supply chain where it's beyond just the ability to manufacture, and some good tips as well. So hopefully you guys find it helpful, and let us know if you have any questions in the comments below. Thanks a lot.
I see inventories across the board becoming more difficult to get allocated to distributors and to shops because most manufacturers, and this is not exclusive to Panaracer, but industry-wide, are working at capacity right now. And there are coming into play several different issues that weren't there initially. One, of course, everyone knows that demand is far outstripping capacity in a lot of respects. And what that means is that aside from the obvious that you're not always going to get everything that you want, at least in the quantity that you want, and perhaps in the models that you want for the short term, and we'll talk about the long term in just a minute, but ongoing concerns that stretch into the medium range aspect of this are things like raw materials and continuing capacity issues for manufacturers, especially those manufacturers in Asia who celebrate Chinese New Year, especially in China. One of the big issues is going to be attrition. It's always been difficult to know what workers are going to come back to the factories in China if the companies that you're looking at procuring product from are based in, at least the manufacturing is based in China. I think this year is going to be unprecedented after New Year's as to the number of workers that may not come back. It's always been an issue, but this year is going to be even more so, which means that aside from not being able to deal with the demand, even if they could, they may not have the manpower to. I don't mean to be an alarmist. This is just something in my 30 years in dealing with Asia that I see is something to watch out for. So I think that there are definitely constraints in the near term that will affect the long term also, Chris. And I think that that's going to continue. That goes to your short and long term question too, is that, nobody knows for sure, but really the manufacturers in general that I talk to, which are quite a few, don't see anything but as 2021 being a catch up year.
I think everyone's scrambling. I think a lot of this is kind of like the whole toilet paper thing, which I'm by no means the first person in the bike industry to relate our lack of supply to the toilet paper, lack of supply back in March. But I do think it's similar. I think there's certainly a whole lot of demand going on, more demand than a lot of people expected. But then I think because of that, as you go up the channel from consumer to bike shop to wholesaler to brand to manufacturer, each person is kind of overreacting each step of the way. And I mean, I'm doing the same thing because who really knows what's going to happen? But my thought is it's all about inventory. Let's buy as much stuff as we can so we can make sure we have some product to sell. So it's a little bit challenging, but I'm trying to accept that we're probably all overreacting just a little bit. At the same time, we have sales coming in like crazy and we do not have enough parts to fill them. So at least for us in the next 6 months, we're actually quite good on frame inventory starting about a year ago, just as our brand was ramping up. We weren't even seeing this extra COVID related demand. We worked with our manufacturer to really expand some capacity, add some more tools and molds. And I feel so I haven't made a lot of fantastic business decisions, but that was definitely one of them because we're in really a good spot relative to our competition when it comes to frame availability. But and we're doing okay on we're really good on our wheels that are made over in Utah, our fusion fiber wheels, just because they're made in America, easy supply chain. But drivetrain parts and some other parts are really hard to come by. So what we're doing is telling a lot of bike shops, hey, if you can order a drivetrain on Amazon or KBP or something, we'll get you a frame. So I think it's just going to take a lot of creativity in the short term here.
There are a lot of manufacturers that are investing in new capacity. They're adding machinery to make whatever products that they're making. This is all going to roll out over the next year or so. So it's not anything that you're going to see immediately, but it will bode well for the future that they'll be able to perhaps be able to shorten lead times to distributors and therefore to shops and therefore into the consumer side of the marketplace, which is, what you're seeing right now is the big problem. So that's something that's positive down the road, because I think that many manufacturers, if they're honest, will tell you that they know that the demand is not going to remain this crazy, but they expect the business to continue to grow to some extent. And personally, uh, this is just me kind of looking into a crystal ball and hoping I'm reading everything correctly. I see this from what bike shops are saying. I see this from people that I talk to within the industry in my segment and other areas of the industry, that they hope to maintain at least a 20% growth. And I think that that's based on what they feel that they're going to be able to produce and therefore deliver. And also, where the industry might settle. When the industry might settle there, nobody really knows. And it begs another question that perhaps we'll have time to broach a little bit further into this conversation. So I think that you'll see manufacturers scrambling to catch up with production. Many of them, bike companies, accessory companies, are out, again, if they're going to be honest with you, 200 to 300 or more days before they're actually building more product for POs that aren't in. And so shops need to be aware of that when they're planning purchases. I've seen shops out there quick to point to distributors, because I have firsthand knowledge with both distributors and with shops. It isn't that simple. The distributors were caught off guard by all of this too, and they're all scrambling to fill in where they possibly can. So everyone really needs to have patience, and it's really important for the bike shops to work more closely with the distributors that they feel comfortable with in order to be the first to know if possible, or be aware of what is changing out there, what manufacturers may have product that they can use that perhaps they might not normally use, but could fill a need, at least in the short term, because everybody's coming in at different times on all of this. Yeah, I think that this is twofold. Aside from the supply part of it, in watching, either working directly with the manufacturer and trying to get information about availability, to, again, working with the distributor that the shop feels most comfortable with, that they have the best, relationship with, um, to try to stay on top of what's happening there, because it's a very fluid situation. And asking once to a distributor isn't always going to get you the answer that you need, because they may not have it. Inventory becomes available, different things happen. It's not like it falls off the back of a truck, but because we're all scrambling to try to manufacture to demand, that um, distributors may not always get exactly the quantity or models that they want, but the good ones have really tried to plan for at least a consistent flow of product, even if it's lower than they might want or that they might need. So I urge any shop to try to work as closely as possible um, with the distributor, or if you're buying directly with the manufacturer themselves.
I do see things leveling out, and yeah, I think the next 6 months to 18 months. Maybe that's because I'm an optimist and I have faith that these big manufacturers, the biggest, Shimano, SRAM, these companies are big, and I have faith that they're going to figure out how to kind of deal with this demand. But no one has a crystal ball, so a lot of these factories, including just we're a relatively small brand. We don't want to invest a ton of money into adding another production line, another set of molds, if all this demand is going to taper off in a year and a half. But what I come back to is not this, try to be this business forecasting person, because I don't know anything. But what I keep coming back to is, I know how awesome bikes are. And I know when I ride a bike, it's fun as hell. And if this pandemic got a bunch of people into buying bikes, probably more on the lower end of the spectrum, not 100% of those people are going to stick with riding bikes. But I can remember when I first started riding bikes when I was a kid, and I was hooked, and I got more and more hooked, and I continue to get more and more hooked. And I know there's a lot of other people out there that ride a bike and ride on some single track, or get into mountain biking for the first time, and they're gonna stick with it. So I think we're gonna see this higher level of demand continue, and I do think with that in mind, manufacturers are going to step it up. It's just happening so quickly that in the short term we're kind of screwed. But bikes are fun. People aren't going to quit riding bikes.
The other part, Chris, that I wanted to talk about, and this is not exactly apropos to these three questions, but there's a concern that I've had that's been growing about how we retain these new customers that are coming into shops. And eventually, when demand starts to catch up, or does catch up with, supply ends up catching up with demand, there are going to be a lot of new riders out there that are going to need continued service. And as an industry, this is not pointing any fingers at shops. It's an industry issue. We haven't been great at retaining new riders. And I think to continue to see the growth that we hope to all get to once we can catch up with demand, we're going to need to look at how we reach out to the end user better. That includes manufacturing, it includes shops, it includes the industry as a whole. I don't have an answer. It's just something that I've been thinking about as I look at everything that's been going on that has been produced from the pandemic in the way of how it affects cycling and the cycling industry. And that's the other part of it. Once you start getting product, how are you going to continue to sell that product? And what are you going to do to help each other reach the consumer?
Yeah, I think we're all kind of in this together. I think the main thing is communication, and communication to customers. I know certain shops we work with, we might say, hey, we can't get you this bike for 2 months. And they might tell that customer, oh yeah, it should be, 4 to 6 weeks for the bike. That's like always the worst thing, because then we'll get calls from the customer, and we always try to build in extra time. We always, and I'd encourage shops to do that too. There's so many unknowns. Like, we're doing our best to say we can get you this bike in 2 months. Really, I think it's going to be 6 weeks, but we're going to tell you 2 months because stuff comes up. And I think if that extra time can be built in to set everyone's expectations, if we can manage expectations all around and let people know we're in this crazy, weird COVID fueled bike shortage, just set the expectation, and I think we're all going to be okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks again to Adam and Jeff for taking the time to talk with us. Hopefully you guys found it helpful. Of all of the points, a lot of them are fairly obvious. It's going to be a mess for a year plus. But I think one of the more important points to emphasize is the importance of retaining these new customers we have in the bike industry. We saw a 200 to 300% increase around the industry as a whole. We should be doing everything we can to keep those riders engaged, keep them excited about the sport. Don't let them just buy the bike, walk out, and then you don't do anything to keep them into it and continuing on with the sport. It's easy to forget how steep the learning curve is in cycling. So give them some support, give them classes, teach them how to maintain their stuff, show them where to ride safely and where to have a good time. Put on fun events once COVID lifts. Do all you can to keep your new customers that are completely new to the sport engaged, and don't just look at it as a quick buck where you took the money and then you never hear from them again. It'll benefit you as a shop as well as the sport as a whole over the long term. So definitely make that extra effort. So yeah, thanks again for watching. If you found it helpful, please subscribe to the channel. And if you do that, it'll keep me motivated to keep doing more topics like this. And then let me know what you'd like to see in the comments as well. I'm always open to doing new styles of videos, talking to new people, covering different topics. So yeah, let me know what you're interested in. And if I can, I'll make it work. Thanks again.